and also with your permission, I was thinking, such a good familiar group, that I would just, it's not a long chord, but close a little bit of the distance. Thank you again, Brian, for your leadership, and to those who serve in this room. Let me reiterate my gratitude and thanks for your service. I'm a first-time candidate, and it's a new experience for me. Not always an easy one, but I think of those who serve and their sacrifice. I think that there are those who are serving now, and I always remind myself nobody's shooting real bullets. Yet we're all trying to make our country a freer, safer place. So I'm honored to be in your presence, and thank you all for what you're doing. And I'm not big on surveys, but can I just ask those of you who are comfortable, is this your first time being involved in an election? How many of you? Yeah, so it's a little bit more than half. Oh, this is my first time as a candidate, not my first time being involved. But my first time as a candidate, and I have a feeling that the reason you're here tonight is I decided to run for Congress. And before I get into those reasons, what I thought I would just spend a little time on who I am, do it as quickly as I can, so we get right to the questions, so I can hear even further. Although I definitely appreciated the summary statement and agree with everything, but I want you to know a little bit more about me and why I agree. I'm from Manchester originally. My grandparents came here to work in Manchester's mills, and did so long enough to start a farm in Manchester. And they were celery farmers. And I'm the youngest of 7 children to a family of farmers. It was a great life. It still is. I learned enough about farming, though, that a college career was much more attractive. And so after going through Manchester's Catholic school system and then UNH, 2 great things happened. I got my degree, and I met my wife, Lori, who's from Peterborough. And 5 kids later, we're still living in New Hampshire, now in Bedford. I'm going to spend a moment here and there talking about my values, because I think it's important for you to get a feeling of my values, because those inform my positions. Now, in 1974, my mother was a volunteer for a congressional campaign. It was Dave Banks, who was running for Congress against a Democrat named Norman Morse. This very seat, in fact. And my mother used to drag me around to help her campaign. I held signs. They were on the bus. They did what 4th graders can do on a campaign. And didn't think it was a formative experience, but looking back, it was. The other formative experience was, I don't know if those of you remember, some of you are way too young to remember, but 1974, 75, it was the lead up to the bicentennial. And it was a thrilling, wonderful learning opportunity for a child. You learned what was on the mind of the founders. It was drilled into you. It was everywhere during the bicentennial. You remember that? I remember we were acting out plays. I personally reenacted the Boston Massacre. It was a wonderful time, and we probably learned more about the principles of the founders than other generations had the privilege to. And we also learned that flag was as popular, if not more popular, than any other kind of flag in the colonies. And so that flag, to me, is a nostalgic thing. And I never really put the two together. Even though I was learning them at the same time. I was campaigning with my mother, and I was learning about the founders, and trying to figure out why a snake, and why don't tread on me. I didn't really get the connection, and now I do. The two things are related. We're not trod upon when we take responsibility for our country, our nation, our community, and each other. And ultimately, if we don't do it through our system of government, then nothing else really matters, because that's where our freedom derives. So now I've kind of come full circle. Went from volunteering and understanding what was on the founders' minds to the full expression of it. I wish it weren't necessary. I wish it weren't necessary. But the fact of the matter is, since Carol Shea Porter was elected, the federal deficit has gone from $250 billion to $1.5 trillion. And one of the principles that you stated is the first job is to balance the budget. Everything else derives from a fiscal soundness. And the first job is not being done. The debt at that time was roughly $8 trillion. Still a lot, but not as much as it is today. Almost $14 trillion. Half of it foreign owned. Since Carol Shepard was elected, we cannot stand it. This cannot happen. Now, after graduating, you heard I worked for Senator Gordon Humphrey and Senator Warren Rutten. Great people. They had their own unique strengths, some things they had in common. Their commitment to fiscal discipline, their unique brand of New Hampshire independence, and their accountability to the voters of New Hampshire. You didn't have to go to a town meeting to see your senators then. You didn't have to take a card. You didn't have to do those things that you do now, apparently. So those are the people I learned from. They also got things done. One of the things that had to be done in the early 90s was balance the budget. We were running deficits similar to the ones we're running today. And we had a debt similar in size, proportional to our GDP as we have today. But it took the leadership and will and the guts of the American people to make it an election issue in the midterm elections of 1994 to turn things around. People that I was honored to be part of that movement. In the early 90s, I helped start a group up here called the Concord Coalition, singularly dedicated to balancing the budget. Never thought I'd need the experience again. But here we are, back in the same problem. Only it's worse. It's worse because even though the deficits and the debt are remarkably high, and as high as they were in the early 90s when banks were failing, and we had a president who was trying to force a health care proposal down our throats, catastrophic health, now we have $80 trillion in unfunded liabilities. We passed the health care reform, Obamacare. Back then we killed it. Now we passed it, which promises even more red ink. Promises to intrude in our lives. And oh, by the way, it doesn't deal with the problem, which was the outrageous year-over-year cost of health care. It doesn't deal with that problem at all. After working in Washington, I wanted to come back to New Hampshire. Spent 6 years working, learning, moved back to New Hampshire to work for a manufacturer. You heard it. It was then Sanders, now it's BAE Systems, and I've spent nearly 2 decades there. Very happily, great company. Those of you who don't know the company, it makes products that our servicemen use to keep safe. Plain and simple. It's a great company. There are others like it all across the southern tier who make great products. New Hampshire can still manufacture better than anybody in the world. I still believe that, even though we've lost a number of manufacturing jobs, and that's something else that this election needs to be done. So why leave? Why leave a great career? I have 5 children. They're all looking at me funny. They have a college to go to. Yeah, I mean, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot to run for something, especially if you've never run before. I'm not a career candidate, I'm not a career politician, but I'm that concerned. At the end of the day, I think it's because of those 5 children that I'm running. They're the ones who are going to inherit the mistakes of today. They're the ones. So I'm giving up a career, I left the job, I left everything else I was on, university boards, community boards, all that, left it all, dedicated myself to this one, and working very hard to bring these messages forward. Balance the budget. Turn the economy around. And trust